for all kinds of reasons, and especially just to be in this environment with all of you and to feel the love and respect that you have for each other, you know, faculty to administrators of different programs to graduate students. It's just a lovely, lovely event. And thank you so much, Jerome, for bringing these people together, because you are the hub, or the big brother, I think. You're the big brother. And it's just been amazing. I mean, I have felt love from you. And I can give you a couple of examples. Nurse Barry came to my rescue this morning. He's the best Uber driver in the world. And he also knew to take me to a pharmacy and pick out exactly what I needed. And it did work, thankfully. So thank you. Then Jerome just jogged somewhere to get me some crackers. And I think if I had asked for biscuits, it wouldn't have been nearly as problematic. When I asked crackers, you get crackers? Where's crackers? And it's just a delight to be around people who actually are out in the world practicing and then doing autoethnography about their lives and their work. We don't have that many people in practice, and Art and I both say, we got to get more people involved in the United States who are actually in practice, because I can just see what it does for you and what kind of contributions you're making to this wonderful program that Jerome and others have put together. So thank you very much. Today, what I want to do is share with you several autoethnographic stories that have assisted me to reframe my past, live in the present, and anticipate the future. I've had the great fortune of living a long life and writing many stories. So it was very difficult to choose which ones I wanted to tell you today. But given that this is a mental health conference, I want to present experiences that show a restorying, which many of you have done in here, of potentially difficult times in my life. My hope is that they might resonate with you and provide benchmarks for comparing and giving meaning to your life. I have not sugarcoated these stories, try never to do that, nor always aim to make consistent those things that are uncertain and fluctuating, nor do I wallow in the abyss of victimhood. Instead, I present these stories as sites of learning and coping. Many evocative autoethnographers, including me, tend to focus on writing passionately about an experience of suffering. That being said, I acknowledge all the work that's being done by positive autoethnographers about well-being and happiness, and especially among many of the scholars who are here. So I think my talk will probably resonate with you because I'm doing a little bit of positive psychology here. Without at first knowing that's what I was doing. Today then I want to emphasize the day-to-day flow of daily life and the feeling world, seemingly ordinary conversations that I shared with loved ones, and other mundane activities that fill and construct a life, soothe the soul, and provide a context for suffering. These stories have the possibility of leading to understanding lived life in more complex ways, adding meaning to daily existence and providing companionship for you, my readers and listeners, in your joys and your life tribulation. I live an autoethnographic life. You probably heard that here today, earlier. By which I mean that autoethnography can be thought of not only as research, stories, and method, but also as a way of being in the world. While I try consciously to be in the moment, experiencing life as lived, at the same time I seek to also consider, analyze, and understand emotions, thoughts, and events that take place. This involves a process of introspection, where I not only reflect on my life, but I also reflectively examine how and why I think, act, and feel as I do. Living an autoethnographic life means that I observe myself observing. I interrogate what I think and believe and challenge my own assumptions, asking over and over if I have penetrated as many layers of my own defenses, fears, and insecurities as the project requires. I think and rethink my life, making conscious decisions about who and how I want to be. An autoethnographic story is a moral story that requires me to figure out and claim my own principles and ethical positioning, given the story I find myself in and the ones that I seek to move toward. What do I care about, and how might I contribute to the greater good, are concerns I believe are inherent in good autoethnographies, and I see that in so many of your presentations here. In writing autoethnography, I use conscious introspection to try to access what goes on in my mind, emotions, and body. The stories I tell are the product of listening to the voices in my head communicate with each other, and being aware also of the voices outside of my head and body that affect how I experience the world. Writing about the events of my life allows me to view and review them as I edit, analyze, and reanalyze them. I learn more about my experiences with each word I change, each reorganization of paragraphs, and each additional question that arises in the process. When writing, I immerse myself in what happened as fully as possible, and sometimes I move backward and then forward, and sometimes even sideways. Writing with an awareness that I am safe in my study as I do this, and I can move away from what happened whenever I need to, and later delete details of what I decide I might not want to reveal. All that gives me the confidence to explore fully, to live an autoethnographic life, and to write well about it refuses self-absorption, which would only blind me to what is going on with those around me who always are part of my story. It means caring as much about understanding others as understanding self. Thus, I describe and interpret my experiences in a relational context, meaning that I take into account the possible views of participants in my studies and characters in my stories. I talk with them whenever possible about what I write. I hold imaginary conversations when I cannot talk to them, and I consider alternative views and interpretations. How might other people in my story tell their version? I try to take others' roles as fully as I can and consider why, given their histories and location in the world, given their reflexive processes, that they act on the world and respond the way that they do, which may not be the way I respond. I write to connect with readers and listeners, and I often contemplate how they may take my story into their lives. Have I written in a literary and evocative enough way that my story will bring forth feelings, thoughts, identifications, and other accounts? I invite witnesses into my thoughts and feelings so that they might feel what they imagine I felt, remember and feel their own experiences, or imagine how they might feel in a similar situation. I write to open up conversations so that those who choose to be in dialogue with my stories might consider how they narrate their own lives. I seek to convey my experience not as a model for how to live, but as a comparison point that might provide possibilities for living. What are the similarities, the differences, and why? Or if respondents can't relate to my experience, to then ask themselves, why not? The answers then provide sociological insight about how we are the same and diverse. Living an autoethnographic life means being concerned about and examining the social processes that affect me, as well as the communities that surround me. It asks that I investigate self and meaning and context, using my ethnographic and sociological sensibilities to understand how socialization, place, ethnicity, race, gender, and other social features affect our stories. Further, living an autoethnographic life means being aware of the economic and political systems that permit and constrain identity and possibilities, and being conscious of the role of structure, power, and inequality. How does the world in which we live limit, enable, require, and sustain our actions and beliefs? And how might we use our stories to promote positive social change and inclusion? And even then, after all these considerations and rewrites, at best, I present a partial story and interpretation, one that is incomplete and full of silences, but one that seems fitting for the moment, and one that I believe to be true. As I excavate my motives, needs, and actions, I also realize that I have limited access to these facets of being, and that others will observe characteristics and make connections that I don't, and perhaps can't see. I know that at another time and on another occasion, I may perceive a life event in newly contextualized ways, and tell it differently nuanced for other purposes or audiences. After all, experience can never be captured in its wholeness. Thus, I always maintain doubt that I have managed to reveal the truth, though I have tried my best to do so. No matter all these qualifications, autoethnography provides at the least a starting place from which to interrogate the twists and turns of life, and an opportunity to write stories about our lives with hope that we might be survivors of whatever story we find ourselves in. With these guidelines and caveats, I turn now to the stories I have chosen for today. The first describes how, as I wrote about my childhood, I reframed it in terms of the feeling world of the everyday, instead of focusing on the episodic troubles. The second story takes you into autoethnographic conversations I had with my dying sister that helped prepare both of us for her death. And the third is a short story showing art and me coping currently with the political authoritarianism in the United States, something we've done a lot of talking about here interpersonally. So I turn now to writing about my childhood. In 2009, I wrote a book called Revision, Autoethnographic Reflections on Life and Work. In it, I re-examined and revisioned some of the stories I had published previously about events in my life. Taking into account responses and critiques evoked by my work, I tried now to connect the past to my contemporary life. These current reflections and stories, which I called meta-autoethnographies, then fast-forwarded these accounts to the present. The process provided opportunities to alter the frame in which I wrote the original story, ask questions I didn't ask then, and include vignettes of related experience that had happened since I lived and wrote the first version. So in essence, I turned the narrative snapshots I had written in the past into a form more akin to a video, or as Art mentioned, a text in motion. One in which I drag and drop in new experiences as well as revised interpretations of old storylines. Then I reorder and thus restory them. My goal was to model a way to reflectively make sense of experience, using hindsight to follow the thread back into the labyrinth, and to move readers to contemplate similar ways of accessing their own lives. I made the case that it was valuable to revision our stories, though as scholars we rarely have the chance to do so, to rewrite it in some kind of publication after we've already published something about our lives. In the first chapter of this book, Revision, I wrote about growing up in the 1950s in a rural neighborhood in the southern United States. I take you briefly now into one of the stories, which invites you into the feeling world of my childhood as opposed to focusing on the traumatic crises that were the emphasis of my initial writing and remembering. This excerpt is called Going Down the Road and Sitting in the Store. I grew up in a farming area on the outskirts of Luray, a small town of 3,000 in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, surrounded by the Blue Ridge Mountains. In the summer, we kids played softball or baseball in an overgrown field with no gloves, mind you. Hide and seek in the cornfields, and when the weather was uninviting, we played board games in someone's unfinished and damp basement. The ball games were endless and continued day after day. Similarly, when one of us was about to go broke in Monopoly, I assume that's a game you're familiar with, the other loaned her money, or we created more dollars out of construction paper to make the amusement last. Sometimes one Monopoly match continued all summer. Our games were about being with friends and whiling away the hours more than about winning. All these activities were fun, but the pursuit that consumed most of our time was running the roads, as my mother called it, and going to the store, as we called it. Almost every day, the neighborhood kids walked or rode bikes for hours on end along the country road that connected our spread-out houses. Barefoot and paying little attention to the hot pavement or our stumped and bleeding big toes, we chased each other, found a field of grass or a forest of leaves to lie in and watch the cloud formations, sat together on the side of the road watching cars go by, or simply walked from house to house and back again. In the heat of summer, we went to the creek, where we devised rope swings that dropped us into the deep end of the rocky, cool water. But most often our destination was Ruth's Fairview Grocery, our favorite hangout, which we called the store. About a third of a mile from my house, the store was a red brick, one-room building that formed the nexus of the community. I went to the store almost every day, sometimes twice. It gave me something to do and offered the possibility of seeing my friends also walking along the road or hanging out at our meeting place. "I'm going to the store," I'd yell into my house and take off whether anyone replied or not. Nobody worried about the safety of the kids in that small community during the 50s and 60s. Along the way, I gathered empty pop bottles tossed among the worthless beer cans, cigarette butts, and wrappers that littered the ditches along Fairview Road. I combined the money I got from the deposits with the nickel rewards I got from the men working for my father, who sent me to the store for their cold pop and moon pies. This was the only way we had making money then. I can still see my brother Rex pulling his little red wagon down the road collecting bottles to trade for their 2-cent deposit. A day's collection of bottles, buttressed by my weekly allowance of 35 cents, bought a bag full of penny candy. I loved watching Ruth, the owner, fill my paper sack with the goodies I pointed out to her. Small waxed bottles, I drank the sweet syrup inside and then chewed the sweetened, waxy coating until it hardened and broke into pieces in my mouth. There's taffy, peanut butter cups, caramels, a deal at 2 for a penny, Mary Jane's, my absolute favorite, Tootsie Rolls, and bubble gum. I also bought pop, usually a 6-ounce Pepsi, and sometimes a popsicle or a Nutty Buddy. After picking out our sweets, my friends and I would socialize in the store, reaching our hands time and again into our individual stashes, and sometimes trading with each other. In the winter, we sat around the wood and coal-fed pot-bellied stove for hours on 2 old bus seats, patched with unwinding electrical tape. Warming our hands, we then unbuckled our plastic galoshes and watched melting snow disappear through the cracks of the uneven floorboards. We sometimes swallowed the pennies and nickels we dropped as well. In the summer, we dangled our feet off the store's front porch, swigging pop and eating ice cream while listening to the talk of the adults, mostly men who sat on empty kegs or perched their feet on sacks of feed on the porch. When other local men rode up on horses, we scampered inside to tell Ruth to bring them their chewing tobacco, hoping that we might get a nickel or a dime from their fame for our efforts. In the evening, the inside of the store was transformed as the neighborhood men gathered to play cards. Pulling the bus seats around the table they constructed by laying a piece of plywood on barrels, they played a game called Setback, which is a simple high-low bidding game. Usually we kids headed for home as the card game began, but it was getting dark by then, finishing our candy on the way and depositing the paper wrappers along with the trash on Fairview Road. I end this story here, so that, because there's a lot more of it in my book, so that I might describe how I wrote and revised the childhood stories that were in my book, Revision. These vignettes, such as the one I just read to you, move slowly and gently with no specific destination in mind. Mostly I describe feelings and scenes. Some are particular, many are not, that float through my memory. I write these tales where not a lot happens and not much is said, to evoke a rural life where stimuli don't overwhelm and life unfolds sometimes at a snail's pace. In these stories, I place myself back in my neighborhood and recall the laziness of summer, the fun of filling the days playing sports and board games, and the intrigue of trying to figure out the world around me. As I call up these memories, I taste my aunt's southern cooking, ham hock and green beans, fried bologna on white bread, and freshly baked cakes and pies. My mouth waters as I anticipate the joy wrapped in the bag of candy I bought from the neighborhood store. I smell the newly mown hay, then breathe in a mild aroma of cheap liquor and a powerful whiff of the town cannery where my friends' fathers worked. I hear the laughter of my friends, ignore again the sound of adults telling me to get my nose out of a book. And I am suddenly startled as I recall my father's trucks and tractors, starting up under my bedroom window at 7:30 a.m. sharp. I still think that's why I'm a late riser. I feel the sun on my arms, the pain of stubbed toes as I walk the neighborhood roads, the wind on my face as I ride my bike, and the coolness and splash of the creek water as I jump from a rope swing. Reliving these sense memories stimulates me to recall the overall feeling of growing up in Luray, the feeling world of my youth. I did not, however, begin the process of writing these stories, including this excerpt, with a description of the day-to-day feeling world I convey now. In the first version of this chapter, I focused on several traumatic events of family alcoholism, infidelity, deceit, betrayal, and even violence. An approach often used by autoethnographers and memoir writers in portraying their childhoods. This initial writing was therapeutic and rewarding insofar as I confronted and examined difficult experiences. Additionally, constructing these tales broke through a barrier that had prevented me from previously composing stories about my early life. I had convinced myself that I didn't remember my childhood well enough to write it. These initial stories I wrote gave me confidence that I could recreate my early years and prompted me to remember and construct other everyday, less dramatic aspects of that time period as well. I began to think about how meaning resides in the mundane details of everyday life, in addition to the tragic ones. And I questioned whether these traumatic episodes were reminiscent of the way I lived my life on a daily basis. I came to feel that daily life contains the trauma, at the same time trauma circles in and through the events and feelings. I came to feel that it was important to focus on how trauma is contextualized by daily life, as well as on how trauma sometimes interrupts that life. Though these initial stories had been important for me to examine, they did not necessarily need to be told to others. I did not want to reduce and freeze my childhood and family relationships into those episodic traumatic moments, especially when so much had happened in the 50 years since. I could not justify exposing these secrets when doing so might bring pain and tarnished memories to family members, since I did not seem to be crippled by these events or need to reveal them to move on with my life. And I was uncertain that publishing these stories would bring healing to me beyond what had occurred in the writing I had done privately. Moreover, I was not convinced that these stories would give readers, who I feared had gotten somewhat desensitized to the tales of trauma, more insight into their own lives. Did it make sense then to describe these stories in a book, which might engrave them in my readers' minds? Is this the way I wanted to remember my childhood and family? Would these stories represent the truth of my childhood? Might not publishing this account make these events loom even larger in my life, magnify rather than minimize them? Jules Henry says, the secret of sanity is to exaggerate the good of the world. By magnifying the trauma, wouldn't I run the risk of dwelling in it and getting stuck in the muck? For me, at this point in my life, that's not where I wanted to live or the story I wanted to tell. This does not mean that I ignored the traumatic moments in this account, or that others should do so. Remnants of the original stories linger within and between the lines of the stories I do tell, complexifying my relatively happy portrayal with hints, some subtle and some more direct, of ambiguity, conflict, and suffering. This is how I remember living most days in Luray, not as existing within the trauma, but as coexisting with trauma. In describing this coexistence, I try to bring forth the pace and rhythm of my everyday life so that you might recall the sounds, smells, and sights of your childhood. Did these senses serve as alleviating conditions that helped you survive whatever trauma you experienced? Might we celebrate the ordinary in the feeling world to find the extraordinary that can come from it? The second story I want to share today comes from an article entitled Autoethnographic Conversations with My Dying Sister, which was published in its long form in Women in Language in 2024. I'm happier than I've ever been, my 75-year-old sister Judy says when she answers my call. Her voice is passionate, confident, and strong. Given my own apprehensions about dying, I am surprised by her upbeat statement. It is August 2023, and Judy has entered the final stage of aggressive kidney cancer. She has stopped chemo because of unbearable side effects. Under hospice care, she is sleeping in a hospital bed in her living room and being cared for by her husband, Ron. Though several times I traveled 5 hours from Florida to Mississippi to see her, for the most part, our relationship takes place in day-to-day phone calls. Today I'd like to read excerpts from 3 of these many, many conversations that we had during the transitional moments between living fully and dying well. Conversation 1. Ron passed out in the middle of the night, my sister says. His blood sugar went really low and he fell to the floor. He was pretty much out of it. I made my way to the kitchen on my walker and got him orange juice, but he still could not stand up. So I pulled my walker around near him and sat on it for weight and had him pull himself up by the handlebars. Oh, Judy, you should have called 911, emergency care. This is dangerous for both of you. The rescue squad will help in these situations. Promise me you'll call them next time this happens. She doesn't respond, and instead continues with her story. As she talks, I realize that summoning the rescue squad as well as admitting Ron to the hospital would have demanded expensive co-pays, given their limited Medicare Advantage insurance. More importantly, if Ron is in hospital, who would take care of my sister that night and after? That moment makes me realize how different our lives are. I live a relatively stress-free, upper middle class life, a retired life in terms of finances. She and Ron are unable to work given their physical conditions and need for Ron to stay home with her, and thus they depend solely on Social Security with all the medical expenses. Social Security does not go far. Conversation 2. I want to be cremated, my sister says, and I want my ashes spread grew up in Lorraine. Okay, I say, but you will have to tell me where the stream is, which she does in detail. I don't want a funeral or a casket and all, she continues. That's too sad. I want a memorial service at Mom's church, like the one we had for Art, who was our brother who died just a short while before. I'll choose the music you should play. You should speak at my service and tell stories about me, like you did at my brother's memorial. At our brother's memorial. Then maybe there could be a gathering in Mississippi for the people who live there. And no big dinners, she continues. Too much organization required. I want an ice cream social, since everyone in our family likes ice cream so much. That's no trouble. Maybe you'd organize a social at our home in Mississippi, which remember is 5 hours away from where I live and another 10 hours away from where the rest of my family lives. Okay, I say about the ice cream social, but I'd have to figure out what kind of ice cream to get and how to get it there without it melting. Oh no, you wouldn't. We'd all bring our favorite kind. We laugh. Look at me saying we as though I'll be looking down from above telling you what to do. Well, maybe you will, I say as we laugh together again. But just in case, make sure to write this all down for me. I will. It's so hard to talk to Ron about all these plans. It upsets him too much. You know, you can always talk to me about dying and what you want, I say. I do, and I appreciate it. I do all this planning and talk about death so much because it helps me accept what's happening. I understand that, I say. You teach me so much about how to have a good dying experience. Tell me more about what you want. Well, I've picked out some of my jewelry for you, some things of Mom's I had, some pieces I think you'll like. And I have a whole bag of quilts for you of crochets. I know how much you like those. Judy chats away about all she wants to get to loved ones. I am sad at the memory our talk generates of losing our beloved Mom and Dad and our 2 brothers. And sadder still at the prospect of losing Judy. But I find myself smiling and glad for the conversation, strangely comforted and at peace as I listen and take notes, which Judy always encourages me to do. Conversation 3. Ron and I joined a church, Judy says. It's small, just 40 members. We don't have a fancy building or anything, just a small room with a podium. But the people are so nice. They lay hands on me every Sunday and they pray for me. That's wonderful, Judy. Being with other people is so good for you, and I'm glad you have found this church. You seem so happy. I am. Last Sunday, the preacher came around with a microphone and asked if I wanted to give testimony. I took the mic and said, I came here to church initially to learn how to die, but instead I have learned how to live. Everybody clapped for me and shouted amen, she told me. That's wonderful, I respond. Though I am not institutionally religious at all, and surely do not hold fundamentalist beliefs, I chuckle at her wisdom as I envision the hallelujah scene. And Ron and I are doing so much better together now, she continues. The Lord helped me see what my bringing up the topic of dying so much is how it's part of what upsets him. It reminds him that he's going to lose me, and he can't deal with that. And hearing me talk about it all the time is like I am saying to him that I am looking forward to dying, to not being here with him anymore. I think that's insightful that you recognize that, Judy, I say. The Lord told me to concentrate on the moment, just bring joy to Ron's life. So I started talking more about how much I appreciate him. I grabbed his hand one day and told him how happy I am to be with him, and that he surely lived up to his marriage vows, in sickness and in death. How did he respond? He cried. It was a close and loving moment. As I described these unassuming, daily, hour-long phone conversations, I realized that for Judy and me, they provided an intimate way to be with each other as we contemplated her dying. It was clear that my sister needed to talk. Telling her stories helped her cope with her situation. I needed to listen. Deep listening helped me feel that I was doing something for my sister. For both of us, spending time together on the phone was our way of giving and receiving love. Reminiscing about our past gave a sense of continuity and belonging as we faced her end of life. My sister was the only person alive who had been a part of my life from birth. She was my last remaining sibling. Who would I be without her? No doubt a part of me would disappear when I had nobody who remembered with me the things that she and I shared. No doubt her death would make me feel nearer to the end myself. If my sister, not even 3 years older than I am, is dying, then how close to death am I? As I look back at these conversations now, I feel gratitude for an autoethnographic perspective that helped me circumscribe this experience and mindfully reflect on our relational process and the deeper meaning contained in what might appear on the surface to be casual exchanges. They are not. Conversation with Judy taught me much about living and coping in this liminal end of time and space. Writing and rewriting this experience also brought practical awareness about how I want to live. As I constructed our conversations, I became deeply motivated to continue honoring my relationship with my sister, to call often, listen deeply, help out financially, and make plans to visit her, no matter how inconvenient it might be to get there. Before she died, Judy read the stories I wrote. She said she understood that I needed to tell them in a believable way rather than an idealized way, which was insightful. Nonetheless, my knowing she would be a reader no doubt influenced how I nuanced the stories. But the joy she expressed from being the subject of my writing more than made up for any bias or silence that might have been inherent in the shared telling. And our conversations about the stories I wrote brought forth many more passionate and loving discussions between us, demonstrating the power of autoethnography to open up conversations that have the possibility to lead to deeper understanding and sometimes even relational healing and closeness. Judy died on Thanksgiving Day, November 23rd, 2023. Living in and with another's plight, attending to and caring for an intimate other, and learning how to love without hesitation or regret, I believe that these were some of the gifts of autoethnographic writing and living an autoethnographic life. These gifts provided the best way I know of coping well with life ending. I move now to the last story I want to tell, which takes you into how Art and I currently experience the authoritarian rule of the Trump regime. It's different. It's entitled, What Did He Do Today? What did he do today? I ask Art, who always tunes into the news when he's on his way home. Art knows what I'm asking.
Oh, just more of the usual, arresting immigrants with no due process, threatening to cut Medicaid for poor people even when he says he's not, applauding his henchmen who cuff and arrest Medicare protesters. Changed his mind on tariffs again today and boasted of his deals. Claims he obliterated the Iran nuclear sites when most reports suggest otherwise. Lies, lies, lies. That's all he does is lie about everything.
Sounds like just another day in the great country of the USA. He's exhausting. What did you talk about in therapy today?
What do you think? Trying to learn how to cope with the political situation and how it hangs over our heads all the time.
Well, that sounds cheery. Did you learn anything?
Oh, I learned that it is good to have someone to talk with about these things, in addition to you, of course.
I'm glad you have a therapist. He gives me a break from the political.
Well, that's not all she and I discussed.
I know. Anyway, what can we do?
Nothing, really. He's going to do what he's going to do, and there's nothing we can do about it.
Okay, time for a walk down the mountain, I say as Molly and Dolly dance in circles around us. What's great about a walk, in addition to the movement, is that most of the time we don't think or talk about politics. Instead, we admire the beauty of nature and enjoy our two rat terriers who are caught up in the here and now. Throw the ball, I say. I'll let them off their leashes. The dogs run as fast as they can down the mountain barking. They then play keep away with one holding the miniature tennis ball in her mouth. We throw another ball for the second dog, and to keep the game in motion. I scamper for the ball before Dolly gets it. We need this, some breathing space. Art says.
We do.
Good.
Golly, come.
Molly, come, I say, and the dogs run back and forth between us to get their treats. In return, they plant kisses on our faces when we've been. Back at our summer cabin, we both check our phones to see what he did in the past few hours. Do you believe? It starts and the conversation swells again until I place wine and goat cheese on the outside deck, a sign that political talk is over now. We sit and admire the colorful sunsets, discuss our day, and snap a few photos to send to friends on Facebook. At dark, we go inside and fix dinner. During dinner, Art turns on YouTube and cycles through all the news stories, all of which focus on what he did today. I tune in when something grabs my attention while reading articles and news items on my phone. After dinner, we turn to our favorite series, The Resident.
We viewed 90 of the 106 episodes. We should be watching comedy and laughing, not engaging in a hospital drama where people are traumatized, sick, and dying. We have enough of that in our real lives.
Better than watching Trump. Anyway, the actors have become my friends. And there's much about friendship and romance in the show, as well as medical ethics and politics, dignity and death, all topics I'm interested in. It takes my mind off the political situation and, ironically, our own health concerns. We need that. Art nods, but I'm not sure he's convinced. So that's a very brief look into a day in the life of Carolyn and Art during the Trump regime. We enter, we leave, we break away, we come back, we are disgusted, fearful, we are joyful and loving, grief-stricken and traumatized, we feel suffocated, and then into the vortex, we breathe. We wonder how much worse it can get, though we know the answer. There are no limits to Trump's evil and cruelty. We talk about the 1930s and what led up to the Holocaust. Now we understand how it was that people stayed and refused to believe. But it can't happen here, we assure each other. Then quiet. As we contemplate that, it can happen here and may already be in process. We shake our heads, take deep breaths, and move to our everyday concerns. The painter coming tomorrow, a friend we should call. Philosophically, we move between being realistic and in denial, between acceptance and resistance, confusion and clarity, and hopelessness and optimism. In practice, we do what we can. We go to rallies, including in the small conservative mountain towns that surround us in the summer, where we hold signs and wave to those who honk their horns. We scream, resist, and no kings, and ignore those in their pickup trucks who yell in favor of Trump. It is exhilarating. We seek out comfort and companionship from like-minded folks in our neighborhood, on TV and Facebook. I say to my friend Mary, you know, it's good to be old now, that I have to anticipate and live through what is to come. Maybe, she muses, but who wants to die and leave the world in this state for our children and grandchildren? She then quotes the Buddhist teacher Joanna Macy. This is a dark time filled with suffering and uncertainty. It is natural that we feel the trauma of our world. So don't be afraid of the anguish you feel or the anger or fear, because these responses arise from the depth of your caring and the truth of your interconnectedness with all beings. Consoled by these words, I vow not to shut down, but instead to be present and in it, to feel fully the joy and anguish. I pledge to view hope as active, not passive, to continue doing what we are doing, no matter the outcome, to protest, to join with others, to send donations, to hand out food to the hungry, and do acts of love and care in my daily life. I vow to appreciate the world as a beautiful and tortured place. Yet, the pain of loss and fear overwhelm me sometimes, and I retreat. Back and forth, I stumble, trying to figure out how to love my country while I am embarrassed by it and scared for and of it. embarrassed and angered by how Trump treats the leaders of other countries, and how people there must see us now. Frightened as I have never been before that we have lost our democracy. Worried about what he will do today and tomorrow and the next day. Who and what will he destroy next? So, I don't want to leave you there. I don't want to leave my son there. This was too sad and painful. I'd like to end now on an upbeat and hopeful note, not leave you or me in a sense of despair. As I claimed in my childhood stories and showed in the conversations with Judy and Art, trauma interrupts life, but daily life and mundane conversations provide a context, a holder for trauma. Additionally, we humans are moved to disrupt trauma with celebrations that bring joy and happiness into our lives whenever we can. Given that, I'm going to ask you now to join me in a brief celebration that we had for Art on his 80th birthday on July 25th, 2025. It's only 40 seconds long. Then we held the event in the peak of scorching hot Florida. Former students came from around the country to join our new friends and neighbors. The birthday party was filled with more love, closeness, and joy than we had experienced for a while during the Trump era. Art and I delighted in seeing and catching up with everyone, and we basked in watching former students connect with each other, some after more than 35 years. We celebrated Art for 2 days. We also celebrated the community of our past and present. We celebrated the joy of being alive together. Humidity and Trump be damned. We celebrated our desire to bring kindness and integrity to the world in whatever small way that we could. That way we agreed was to reconfirm and honor our mutual respect for living an autoethnographic life. Just as we have done in this conference. I feel it very strongly. And that's how we cope, one day at a time of care and attention, one day at a time of hope and optimism, and at least 2 days at a time of celebration of love, relationships, and living a meaningful life. And when life gets interrupted, as it does, as mine certainly did last night, you must adapt and go with the flow. No pun intended. No judgment on the singer.